I overheard my father telling my brother, "Your brother? He's not receiving one single thing." Mom was grinning. Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own home? Like you're watching your life from the outside while everyone else is living it? Well, imagine hearing your own parents toast to your utter ruin, planning to cut you out of everything, smiling as they plotted to frame you for their multi-million-dollar crimes. And then, the real gut punch, realizing they were never even your parents to begin with. My whole life, I've been the invisible son. The one my parents overlooked, the one they tolerated. My younger brother, Kevin, though, he was practically royalty. God's gift to humanity, deserving of all praise, all rewards, just for existing. While Nate, was the background character, the perpetual scapegoat. Honestly, the favoritism in our house was so blatant, so sickening, it felt like a twisted sitcom where I was always the punchline. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. This was a textbook case of golden child versus scapegoat, a dynamic that bled into every corner of our lives. From the moment I turned 18, guess who was expected to bust their ass in the family business? That's right, me. Kevin mostly just existed. I poured my life into Hartwell restorations. I took it from a $2 million operation to a $15 million powerhouse, working 60-hour weeks, bleeding sweat and tears for that company. Kevin? He'd show up maybe twice a year for a photo op. And what was my reward for tripling the revenue? Adequate. That's the word my dad used. Adequate. Can you believe the audacity? The double standards were just the beginning. When I graduated high school with honors, working part-time at the shop to contribute, my parents barely blinked. That's nice, they mumbled, already planning Kevin's huge graduation bash for his 2.4 GPA after 5 years, by the way, because he failed 2 classes. Can you even imagine? And it got worse. I landed the Jacobson Museum contract, our biggest client ever, a $3 million deal over 5 years. I worked my tail off, made all the calls, drove hours for meetings. But at the next board meeting, Dad clapped Kevin on the back, saying, "Great job on the networking." Kevin, who had never even met anyone from that museum. The credit, the praise, it was always for him. I remember another time in high school for years straight, every single semester, I made the honor roll. My parents? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Crickets. Meanwhile, Kevin finally passed his driver's test on the 3rd try, and what did he get? A brand new car. $15,000. Because basic competency after multiple failures apparently deserved a reward, but academic excellence and hard work? That's nice, dear. Christmas was a cruel joke, too. Kevin's presents would pile up like a mountain. The latest gaming systems, designer clothes, everything he'd whined about. My pile? A flannel shirt, maybe some clearance socks or practical gifts, as Mom would say with that smug little smile, as if she deserved a medal for buying me work gloves while Kevin unwrapped a brand new laptop. It was crushing year after year. And Kevin? He was just as bad, if not worse, in his own entitled, selfish way. He'd rub his golden child status in my face constantly. Mom said yes to me, but she'd probably say no to you. He'd smirk. He'd accidentally break my things, then play the innocent victim when I got mad. Once, he took my restored vintage radio, a project I'd poured 6 months into, and just left it out in the rain. When I was heartbroken, my parents told me I needed to be less materialistic. But if I so much as tripped on Kevin's shoelace, I was grounded for a week. I learned fast, no one in that house had my back. So I shut up, kept my head down, and I worked hard. I got my first real job at the shop at 16, saved every single penny, devoured every bit of knowledge I could about the business. I told myself I didn't need their validation anyway, but every night, hearing their laughter with Kevin downstairs, alone in my cramped, converted storage closet of a bedroom, Kevin, of course, had the huge room with its own bathroom. It stung. When I was 13, I'd asked about switching rooms. Mom's response? "You should be grateful to have a room at all." That one line, it summed up my entire childhood. Dad took Kevin to baseball games, to car shows, all the father-son stuff you see in movies. If I asked to come along, always, "Next time, buddy," or This is a Kevin thing. But next time never came.
There was no Nate thing.
There was just me, alone in the garage, teaching myself how to fix things because no one else ever would. But then there was Grandpa Ray. And this part, it's really important. He was my dad's father, ironically. An old-school army mechanic, a legend with anything mechanical. He was the only one who ever really saw me. While my parents were busy at Kevin's mediocre baseball games or obsessing over his latest social drama, I'd be in Grandpa's garage, covered in grease, learning how to rebuild carburetors, replace transmissions. Those days were pure gold. They were the only times I felt like someone actually gave a damn about me. "You got something special in those hands, boy," he'd say, working side by side with me. "Your dad never had the patience for this stuff." He'd shake his head, like he couldn't quite figure out where he'd gone wrong with his own son. Grandpa saw right through my parents' twisted favoritism. I remember my 15th birthday. They forgot it. Not "we'll celebrate later," but completely, utterly forgot. Like March 15th didn't even exist. They remembered Kevin had a party that day and needed a ride, though. Mom even said, "Oh, it's your birthday tomorrow, isn't it? We'll celebrate next weekend." Next weekend never came. No cake, no mention, ever again. When Grandpa found out, he was livid. He showed up that night with the most beautiful set of precision tools I'd been eyeing forever. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he boomed, loud enough for my parents to hear from the kitchen. Some things are worth celebrating properly. The look on my dad's face? Priceless. Half embarrassed, half furious that his own father was calling him out. Every Christmas, while I unwrapped my practical gifts, socks, school supplies, Grandpa would sneak me something real. Quality tools, the kind I still use today. One year, my parents actually complained. Mom had the audacity to say, "He doesn't need to be spoiled, Joe," as if a decent set of wrenches was comparable to Kevin's new gaming console. Grandpa just stared her down. "Recognizing talent ain't spoiling," he said, his voice firm. "It's investing." Then he winked at me.
That was my grandpa.
When I was 20, Grandpa got diagnosed with Parkinson's. It was devastating. He couldn't work on cars anymore, couldn't do the things that made him feel alive. I spent every spare moment with him, even when my parents complained I was neglecting family obligations, which really meant I wasn't around to cover for Kevin's constant disappearing acts at the shop. Before Grandpa passed 3 years ago, he pulled me aside. His hands were trembling, but his eyes, they were still sharp. "Don't trust your father," he warned me. "I've seen how he looks at that company, like it's just money waiting to be spent. Promise me you'll protect what we built." I promised him. I had no idea then how vital that promise would become. Hartwell Restorations, the company Grandpa started in 1965 with just a single-bay garage and an incredible talent for bringing old cars back to life. By the time he couldn't work anymore, it was a 16-bay facility with 31 employees, contracts with major museums, and a reputation built on decades of unwavering quality. When he got too sick, my dad took over. And that's when things started to shift. Not dramatically at first, just subtle changes. Equipment orders that didn't quite make sense. New vendors I'd never heard of. Expenses that seemed off. I flagged some of it to Dad, and he just waved me off. "Focus on your job, Nate. Stop playing accountant."
So I did.
And that, looking back, was the biggest mistake I ever made. For the next 3 years, I buried myself in the actual work. I rebuilt engines, restored classics, trained new guys, brought in clients, managed relationships. While my parents and Kevin handled the business side, I just kept building, thinking everything was fine because the company kept growing.
God, I was so naive.
So incredibly stupid. Then, last month, everything shattered. I was working late at the shop, like always. But that night, I heard voices from the office kitchen. My parents. And Kevin, who never stayed after hours. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, just grabbing a coffee. But then I heard my name, and something made me freeze. I pressed my ear against the door. Dad's voice, cold as ice, cut through me. "Kevin gets everything. The house, the business, the investments, all the offshore accounts. Nate? He's not getting a single thing." And then, Mom's laughter.
Sharp.
Cool. The kind of laugh that tells you exactly where you stand. He never deserved it anyway. Always so eager to please. Like a stray dog begging for scraps. Did you see how hard he worked on that Henderson estimate? Almost felt bad for him. My hands started trembling. 28 years. 28 years of being their son. Staying late, covering Kevin's ghost shifts, taking the blame for his screw-ups. The reliable workhorse who never complained. And they had already written me out of existence. Like I was some clerical error they finally got around to fixing. But that wasn't even the worst part. Not even close. The bankruptcy filing is ready, Dad continued. We file Friday. By Monday, Hartwell Restorations will be gutted. The money will be offshore, and we'll be set for life. I'm thinking Costa Rica. They don't extradite. I almost stopped breathing. Bankruptcy? Offshore money? What the hell was he talking about? What about the employees? Kevin asked with idle curiosity, like he was asking about the weather. They should have saved more, Mom said dismissively. Not our problem. 31 people who should have planned better for their futures. And the vendors? Kevin again. They'll get pennies on the dollar in the bankruptcy proceedings, Dad shrugged, his voice sickeningly casual. Maybe nothing. That's business. 31 employees. Families. Robert, who worked double shifts for his wife's cancer treatments. James, who'd been with the company since before I was born. Angela, putting 2 kids through college. My parents were going to destroy all of them and just walk away. I had to grip the door frame, my vision blurring. Then I heard something that made my blood run absolutely cold. What about Nate?
Kevin asked.
He's been asking questions about the Henderson account discrepancies. Noticed some numbers didn't add up. A chilling pause. Then Dad, his voice calm, matter of fact. Don't worry about Nate. After Friday, he won't be able to cause any problems. I've already got the termination letter ready. We'll say he was skimming from the parts inventory. Been doing it for years. Easy to prove with some creative documentation. Will anyone believe that? Kevin sounded skeptical. Mom laughed. A harsh, contemptuous sound. Who's going to question it? The adopted kid versus the real family?
Please.
We've been building this narrative for years. Nate the screw-up. Nate who can't manage money. Nate who's jealous of his successful brother. By the time we're done, everyone will believe he was stealing from his own grandfather's company. Adopted? The word hit me like a physical blow. A punch to the gut that stole all my air. You think he ever suspected? Kevin asked. That he's adopted? Dad snorted. Please. The kid's so desperate for our approval, he'd believe anything we told him. We've been using him for free labor for a decade. He never questioned why we treat Kevin differently because he's too pathetic to consider the obvious answer. They all laughed. All 3 of them. Laughing at me. At how stupid I was. At how easily they had manipulated me, used me for my entire life. I don't remember walking back to my room that night. The world had tilted. Adopted. They were going to frame me. Destroy 31 families. And they'd been plotting this for years. As the initial shock wore off, a new emotion clawed its way up. Not sadness, not self-pity. This was anger. Cold. Focused.
Pure.
They thought I was pathetic. They thought I was stupid. They thought I'd just roll over, accept whatever scraps they threw at me, just like always. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. See, here's what they didn't know. Last month, Dad had knee surgery. Nothing serious, but he needed someone to handle business. So, in their typical oversight, he'd given me power of attorney. Full access. Every account, every document, every system. And in the chaos of his return, they'd forgotten to revoke it. The grandfather clock chimed midnight. I slipped into Dad's study, my hands trembling as I opened his mahogany desk drawer. What I found confirmed every sickening word I'd overheard. Kevin Hartwell. Kevin Hartwell. Kevin Hartwell. Every deed, every investment, every single company document bore his name. The business I built, the house I grew up in, even the equipment I'd personally selected and maintained, all listed as Kevin's. But the financial records? They were the real smoking gun. For the past 18 months, my parents had been systematically gutting Hartwell restorations. I traced every transaction. Ghost employees, phantom salaries funneled to hidden offshore accounts, nearly $400,000 in the last year alone. Inflated vendor contracts with massive kickbacks to companies dads secretly controlled, another $2 million. Equipment built 2-3 times over. The same diagnostic computer bought 6 times on paper. Fake insurance claims. Phantom repairs. $8 million. $8 million stolen from the company Grandpa built, and they were planning to take the rest before declaring bankruptcy. And then, tucked behind it all, a manila folder. Confidential 1999. Inside was my adoption certificate. Nathan Hartwell, adopted by Richard and Gloria Hartwell. March 15, 1999. I was 3 years old. They'd never told me. Not once in 25 years. I photographed everything. Every document. Every damning email on the shared drive detailing their scheme. Wire transfers. Forged invoices. And then, I found the emails specifically about me. Nate's getting suspicious. He asked about the Henderson account discrepancies. Don't worry, I've already prepared the documentation to frame him. Backdated receipts, forged signatures. After Friday, Nate will be facing embezzlement charges while we're sipping cocktails on the beach. And the final, sickening line. Perfect. The ungrateful little charity case finally gets what he deserves. Charity case, that's all I was to them. The son they adopted, then spent 25 years resenting for not being their real child. I didn't sleep that night. I had too much to do. The next morning, I called my best friend, Joel. We'd been tight since high school. He was the one person who always stuck by me, even when my family tried to isolate me. Now, he was a sharp corporate attorney. I need to meet you, I told him. It's urgent. And bring whatever paperwork you need to set up a protective trust. When I laid everything out for him, the fraud evidence, the bankruptcy plan, the plot to frame me, the adoption certificate, his face went through about 17 different emotions in 30 seconds. Nate, he said slowly, setting down the papers, his voice tight. This is massive. We're talking federal crimes here. Wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy. They're looking at serious prison time. I know, I said, my voice flat. Your whole family, your parents, your brother, they could all go to prison for decades. I know that, too. He studied my face for a long moment.
So,
what do you want to do? I looked him straight in the eye. I want to save the company, protect the employees, and make sure my family faces consequences for what they've done. Joel nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. He'd expected that answer. All right, he said. We've got about 60 hours before they file that bankruptcy. Let's get to work. Over the next 48 hours, Joel and I executed a plan that would have made Grandpa Ray burst with pride. First, we secured the assets. Using my still valid power of attorney, I transferred $12 million, every liquid asset the company had, into a protected trust account, specifically structured to benefit creditors and employees. It was completely legal. I was acting to protect stakeholders from fraudulent bankruptcy proceedings. Not just legal, but a fiduciary responsibility. Joel guided me through every single step, ensuring every document was filed correctly, every transfer authorized. We weren't cutting corners. We were doing exactly what the law required when faced with corporate fraud. Second, Joel flagged all the suspicious transactions to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. No anonymous tips this time. We walked in, sat down with an agent, and laid out everything I'd found. Turns out, they were already investigating some of my parents' offshore accounts from a separate case. My documentation was the final, missing piece they needed. Third, and this was the part that truly mattered to me, we reached out to the senior employees. I met them at a diner, 5 miles from the shop on neutral territory. James McCready, who'd been with the company for 30 years. Angela Torres, who ran our parts department like a general. Dave Kowalski, head of paint. Susan Walsh, our office manager, who'd taught me the business side when I was just starting out. And Robert Simmons, our night security guard, who had let me into the building at 2 in the morning without asking questions for years. They already knew something was wrong. They'd been documenting their own suspicions for months. Strange transactions, equipment that never arrived, ghost employees. They just didn't know who to trust. When I showed them what I'd found, when I told them about the bankruptcy, the offshore accounts, the 31 families my parents were planning to destroy, the room went silent. Then James McCready, this grizzled old mechanic who'd known me since I was a teenager, looked me dead in the eye. "Your grandfather hired me when I was 19, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Gave me a chance when no one else would. Taught me everything I know. I watched him build this company from nothing. And I'll be damned if I let his son destroy it." One by one, they all pledged their support. Angela with her spreadsheets of suspicious transactions. Dave with records of equipment that only existed on paper. Susan with copies of forged signatures she'd noticed, but been too afraid to report. Robert with security footage of Kevin removing files late at night. For the first time in my entire life, I had an army at my back. People who actually gave a damn. People who saw my value when my own parents never could. The explosion came Thursday morning. I was in the break room, casually nursing my third coffee, when Kevin burst through the door. His designer suit was rumpled, his hair a mess. The golden boy had clearly had a rough night. "You," he shrieked, pointing a furious finger at me. "What did you do?" I looked up calmly. "Good morning to you too, Kevin." "Coffee. Don't play games with me. The accounts are frozen. The transfers won't go through. Dad's been on the phone with the bank for 2 hours, and they keep saying something about a trust protection order."
What did you
do? I set down my magazine, took a slow sip. Sounds like someone's been managing the company's assets responsibly. You know, the thing you were supposed to be doing all these years while you were actually just showing up for photo ops. His face went purple. "You had no right." "Actually," I said, "I had power of attorney, full legal authority. And when I noticed some, let's call them irregularities in the company finances, to the tune of about $8 million, I took steps to protect the creditors and employees." "You're welcome." That's when my parents appeared in the doorway. Mom's face was pale, her perfect makeup smudged like she'd been crying. Dad looked like he was one blood pressure point away from a stroke. "Nathan," Dad said, using my full name in that low, dangerous tone he reserved for serious conversations. "We need to talk. In my office.
now?"
So we talked, if you can even call it that. The three of them sat on one side of Dad's massive desk like a twisted tribunal. Kevin, Mom, Dad, a self-appointed judge. I sat opposite them, completely calm. I'd been preparing for this moment for 48 hours. They had been lying to me for 28 years. I knew their weaknesses, their tells, their patterns. For the first time in my life, I had the undeniable advantage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Dad demanded, his face red, veins bulging. That same look he used to give me as a kid, expecting me to back down. I didn't back down anymore. "Protecting Hartwell Restorations," I said simply. "From fraud." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "You don't know what you're talking about." Mom hissed, but her voice cracked. "Oh, don't I?" I pulled out my phone and started reading. Ghost invoices paid to Cayman Islands accounts. Double-billed equipment purchases. Contracts inflated by 20% with the excess disappearing offshore. Ghost employees drawing salaries for work they never did because they don't even exist. A bankruptcy filing scheduled for tomorrow that would destroy 31 families while you three sail off to Costa Rica. No one moved. And my personal favorite. I continued, watching their faces, the plan to frame me for embezzlement when I got too close to the truth. "Really? Backdated receipts and forged expense reports? You thought that would hold up to investigation." Kevin lunged across the desk. I stepped aside, and he sprawled to the floor, knocking over Dad's lamp with a crash. "Careful," I said, not even raising my voice. "Wouldn't want to add assault to your list of federal charges. Although, honestly, at this point, what's one more?" "How dare you?" Mom shrieked, finding her voice. "After everything we've done for you. We took you in when nobody wanted you. We gave you a home, a family, and this is how you repay us." I actually laughed. A hollow, bitter laugh. A family? You mean the family that made me pay rent while Kevin lived free? The family that gave him credit for my work? The family that forgot my birthdays and threw parties when Kevin passed his driver's test on the third try? That family. You were always so ungrateful. Dad snarled. Do you know how much it costs to raise you, to feed you, to put a roof over your head? You owe us everything. What I owe, I said, standing up, my voice firm and clear, is to the 31 employees you were planning to betray, to the vendors you were going to stiff, to Grandpa's legacy that you were going to destroy for a beach house in Costa Rica. That's who I owe. Not you. Never you. Dad's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his face went ash gray. Who is it? Mom asked, her voice trembling. Unknown number, he mumbled, answering. I watched his face drain of all color as he listened. When he hung up, his hand was shaking uncontrollably. That was the FBI, he whispered. They want to talk to all of us. They're sending agents now. I smiled, a slow, cold smile. I know. I called them 2 days ago. The next few hours? They were the most intensely satisfying of my entire life. FBI agents swarmed the building, warrants in hand. Financial records, computers, files, they took everything. Turns out, they'd been building a case even before I came forward, but my documentation was the final piece, the final nail in the coffin. Kevin was the first to be arrested. They found him desperately trying to shred documents in the back office. The golden boy started crying when they put the cuffs on, blubbering about how it wasn't his idea, how Mom and Dad made him do it. Classic Kevin, never taking responsibility. Mom went next. She tried the I'm just a wife, I didn't know anything about the business defense. That lasted until they showed her emails where she explicitly discussed which employees to fire first and how to maximize the pain for those ungrateful workers.
Dad was last.
He tried to bluff his way through it, playing the successful businessman, unfairly targeted. But that facade crumbled as they started listing the charges. Wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, conspiracy, attempted fraud. The list went on and on. On his way out, handcuffed, he stopped in front of me. We raised you, he snarled. We gave you everything. You gave me scraps, I replied, my voice steady. And then you tried to take even those away. Grandpa built this company on integrity. You destroyed it with greed. The difference between us? I actually learned something from him. You'll regret this, he said, his eyes burning with venom. Blood is thicker than water, boy. Family is everything.
You're right, I said.
Family is everything. That's why I'm protecting the family that actually matters, the 31 people who built this company while you were busy stealing from it. They loaded him into the car. I never saw him outside a courtroom again. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Remember how I mentioned Grandpa's will? Turns out there was so much more to it. 2 days after the arrests, Grandpa's lawyer called me. He wanted me to come to his office for an urgent matter. Grandpa, it turned out, had suspected his son's greed for years. He'd watched how my parents treated me. He'd seen the signs of financial manipulation even before he got sick.
And he had prepared.
There was a codicil to his will, a secret edition that would only activate under specific circumstances, if the company faced bankruptcy proceedings, or if any family member faced criminal charges related to fraud. This codicil stated that in that event, all ownership of Hartwell Restorations would transfer immediately to me. Your grandfather came to me 5 years ago, the lawyer explained. He knew what his son was capable of. He wanted to make sure the company he built would survive. And he wanted to make sure you'd be the one to save it. He handed me a letter. Grandpa's handwriting, shaky, but undeniably his. My dearest Nathan, it began. If you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. My son has chosen greed over honor, and Hartwell Restorations faces its darkest hour. I've watched you grow from that scared little boy your Aunt Patricia brought to our door into a man of integrity and strength. Blood doesn't make family, son. Character does. You've shown more dedication to our legacy than William ever did. Save our company. Save our people. Be the Hartwell I always knew you could be. All my love, Grandpa Ray. I'm not gonna lie. I had to step out of that office for a minute. That letter, it broke me, but it also solidified everything. The trial lasted 3 months. Federal court, packed galleries, daily news coverage. The evidence was overwhelming. My documentation, the employee records, the FBI's investigation. There was no way out for them. I testified on the second day. Walking into that courtroom, sitting 10 feet from the people who'd raised me, Mom wouldn't even look at me. Dad glared like he could burn holes through my skull. Kevin just looked utterly broken, like a child who'd finally realized actions have consequences. I told the jury everything. The fraud, the plan to frame me, the bankruptcy scheme that would have destroyed 31 families, the adoption I never knew about, and how they'd used it as justification for treating me as less than human. When Mom's lawyer tried to discredit me, calling me a disgruntled employee seeking revenge, suggesting I'd fabricated evidence, the prosecutor simply showed the jury those emails. The ungrateful little charity case finally gets what he deserves. He's so pathetic, he'd believe anything we told him. After Friday, Nate will be facing embezzlement charges while we're sipping cocktails on the beach. That pretty much ended that defense. Dad got 12 years. Mom got 8. Kevin got 10, plus an additional 2 for obstruction when he tried to destroy evidence. Apparently, he'd attempted to wipe the company's servers after his initial arrest, not realizing I'd set up off-site backups 2 years earlier, because I was apparently the only one in that company who actually planned for emergencies. Frank Duca, Dad's business partner, the one who'd helped facilitate the offshore transfers, flipped on everyone and got 5 years. His wife divorced him, and his kids won't even return his calls. But the real victory for me wasn't watching my family get sentenced. It was what happened to Hartwell Restorations. With controlling interest now legally mine, thanks to Grandpa's codicil, I had a choice. I could run the company myself, cash out, and disappear with the money. Or do something completely different. I chose door number 3. We converted Hartwell Restorations into an employee-owned company. The 31 workers who would have lost everything instead became part owners of a $15 million business. I will never forget the day we signed those papers. James McCready, who'd been with the company for 30 years, just sat there, staring at his share certificates like he couldn't believe they were real. "First time I've ever owned anything of real value," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "First time in my whole life." Angela Torres used her equity stake to finally pay off her kids' student loans. Dave Kowalski took a sabbatical, his first real vacation in 15 years, and came back energized, bursting with new ideas. Susan Walsh got promoted to CFO because truly, nobody knows the company's finances better than she does. And Robert Simmons, the night security guard, the one who let me into the building without questions, he used his shares to finally get his wife the cancer treatment she needed. The treatment insurance wouldn't cover, the one he'd been working double shifts for 3 years to afford. His daughter, Maria, just graduated last month, honors degree in accounting. She works in our finance department now, making damn sure what my parents did can never happen again. As for me, I kept a small ownership stake, but stepped back from day-to-day operations. The company is in good hands, with people who genuinely care about it, people who earned their positions through hard work, not twisted nepotism. I used part of my share to find my biological family. I hired someone to track down my records, trace my history, to figure out where I actually came from. My birth mother, Caroline, passed away when I was 3. That part, at least, was true. But her sister, my Aunt Patricia, had been searching for me for 20 years. She'd sent letters to the Hartwell house every single year on my birthday.
Christmas cards.
Photos of my mother, of my grandparents, of the family I never even knew I had. The Hartwells? They threw them all away. 20 years of letters gone. When Patricia and I finally met, it was surreal. She looked like me. The same eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same way of standing like we're ready for whatever comes next. She told me about my mother. Caroline was 22 when she had me, poor, working 2 jobs, no support system. She truly believed giving me to the Hartwells would give me a better life. They seemed successful, stable, like good people. She had no idea what they really were. Nobody did. Now, Patricia has pictures of my mother holding me as a baby, of my grandparents who passed before they could ever know I existed, of a family that wanted me. 6 months later, and Hartwell Restorations, now rebranded as Legacy Restorations, just posted its best quarter in company history. Revenue up 23%. We've even been featured in 3 industry publications as a model for employee ownership. But I know what you really want to hear about. The updates on my so-called family. Last Tuesday, I got a call from Agent Martinez at the FBI. Turns out my parents were trying to run another scheme from inside prison. They'd convinced some old business associate to help them hide assets the feds had missed during the initial investigation, a storage unit in Nevada with about $200,000 in cash, and some old bearer bonds Grandpa had bought. The associate got cold feet and contacted the authorities. So now my parents are facing additional charges. Dad's looking at another 5 to 8 years tacked onto his sentence. Mom's facing 3 to 5. Kevin tried to cut a deal by testifying against them again. The prosecutor just laughed him out of the room. My parents made me do it. Apparently doesn't work twice. But wait, it gets better. Remember Frank Duca, Dad's business partner, who flipped on everyone? He got released early for good behavior last month. 2 days after he got out, he showed up at Legacy Restorations, asking for a job. James McCready was the one who met him at the door. He told Frank plain and simple, "We don't hire people who steal from their employees." Frank tried to argue he'd paid his debt to society. James reminded him that Maria Simmons had to defer college for 2 years because of what he helped do to her father's pension. Frank left. Haven't seen him since. 3 weeks ago, I got a certified letter from a law firm in Chicago. Turns out, my birth mother had a life insurance policy. The Hartwells had been collecting on it for 25 years. They'd forged documents to make themselves beneficiaries after Caroline died. Patricia and I are suing to recover the funds. Our lawyer says it's an open and shut case. The Hartwells are going to have to pay back every penny, plus interest. We're donating it all to the Caroline Chin Memorial Fund. We just awarded our first 2 scholarships last week. A kid named Marcus who wants to be a diesel mechanic, and a girl named Jenny whose dad worked at Legacy for 15 years before he passed. Full rides for both of them, trade school, tools, living expenses, everything. Patricia cried when we handed out the certificates. So did I, honestly. Oh, and one more thing. Last month, I was going through some of Grandpa's old papers that Patricia had saved. I found a letter he wrote to my birth mother back in 1999, right after the adoption. He tried to contact her, tried to make sure she was okay, that she knew I was being taken care of. The Hartwells intercepted that letter. Never sent it. But Grandpa kept a copy. In it, he promised Caroline he'd watch over me, that he'd make sure I grew up knowing I was valued, that he'd protect me from a son, if it ever came to that. He kept that promise. Even from the grave, he kept it. Final update for you. Someone asked what happened to the house I grew up in. The feds seized it as part of the asset forfeiture.
It went to auction last month.
I bought it. Not to live in, God no. Too many bad memories in those walls. I donated it to a nonprofit that provides transitional housing for young adults aging out of foster care. Kids who, like me, might have ended up with nowhere to go if the Hartwells hadn't taken me in. The organization renamed it the Raymond Hartwell House, after my grandfather. There are 6 young people living there now, getting job training, life skills support, learning that they matter, that someone does give a damn about them. The first resident moved in 3 weeks ago. Kid named Terrence, 19 years old, aged out of foster care with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes. He's working at Legacy now, learning to restore classic cars. James McCready took him under his wing. Last week, Terrence asked me why I did all this. Why I bought the house, started the scholarships, gave him a job. I told him the truth. Someone did it for me once, I said. A grandfather who saw me when nobody else did. Now it's my turn to pass it on. He nodded like he understood completely. Then, he went back to work on a 1969 Camaro we're restoring for a client in Texas.
Good kid.
Reminds me of myself at that age. Hungry, determined, ready to prove everyone wrong.
So, what about you?
Have you ever had to choose between the family you were given and the family you built? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and helps us bring you more stories like this one.